I remember the sound of the wheelchair more clearly than anything else that happened that day. I remember the small wheels rolling over the cracks in the pavement, producing a sharp metallic sound. Click. Silence. Click. Silence. I was sitting in that wheelchair with my hands resting helplessly on my thighs, staring at the large wooden doors in front of me. They were the doors of a church, a Christian church. And I was a Muslim imam. For most of my adult life, I had stood before Muslims teaching them about prayer, discipline, obedience, and devotion. I had been respected in my community. People came to me when they were afraid, when their marriages were struggling, when their children were sick, and when they needed someone to encourage them. But that day, I was sitting helplessly in a wheelchair while my younger brother pushed me toward a place I had never imagined entering. A church. I turned toward him. "Where are you taking me?" He didn't answer immediately. "Yusuf." He finally looked at me. His eyes were red. "Brother, just trust me." "Trust you to do what?" He swallowed. "There is a pastor inside." I stared at him. "You brought me to a church." He lowered his eyes. "Yes." Anger began rising inside me. "Why would you bring me here?" Before he could answer, the church doors opened. What I saw inside would remain in my memory for the rest of my life. People were standing everywhere. Some were praying. Some were crying. Others were simply staring at me. A few stepped backward when they realized who I was. Then an elderly woman near the entrance covered her mouth with her hand. She whispered, "That's him." I looked at her. "What?" She began crying. "That's the man we have been praying for." I was confused. "Praying for me?" She nodded. Then the pastor walked toward me. I expected questions. I expected arguments. I expected someone to tell me what I should believe. Instead, he simply placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "Brother, you are welcome here." I stared at him. Then I asked the question that had been burning inside me since my brother brought me there. "Pastor, why?" He looked directly into my eyes. His answer changed everything. But before I tell you what he said, you need to understand how I ended up in that wheelchair. Several months earlier, I had been standing perfectly well. I was preaching, teaching, counseling families, and living the life everyone expected from me. I never imagined that one day I would be sitting inside a Christian church, desperate for answers and crying out to Jesus Christ. My name is Kareem. At least, that is what people called me. I had been an imam for many years. I grew up in a religious family, and my father was a serious and disciplined man. He taught us to pray, respect our elders, keep our word, and protect the beliefs we had inherited. I remember one conversation with him when I was young. We were sitting outside our home late at night. The air was cool, and my father looked at me seriously. "Kareem, whatever you become in this life, never become a man without conviction." I smiled. "I won't." He nodded. "People will challenge you. They will tell you that their way is better. Do not allow confusion to enter your heart." Those words stayed with me. As I grew older, I became deeply involved in religious teaching. Eventually, people began calling me Imam. I married my wife, Amina, and we had 3 children. Our oldest son, Samir, was quiet and thoughtful. Our daughter, Mariam, was emotional and compassionate. Our youngest son, Ibrahim, was always asking questions. We were not wealthy, but our home was peaceful. Every morning, I woke up with purpose. I taught. I prayed. I visited families. I counseled young people. I attended funerals. I helped settle disputes. People came to me when they were afraid. They came when their marriages were falling apart. They came when their children were sick. They came when they had lost their jobs. They came when they needed someone to tell them that everything would be all right. And I always tried to be that person. But there was something nobody knew. I was afraid too. I simply never told anyone. I was afraid of death. Not because I thought I was going to die that particular week. I was afraid of the question that comes when a person realizes that life is temporary. What happens after this? What if everything I believed was wrong? What if my religious knowledge wasn't enough? I never said these things publicly. How could I? I was the Imam. People expected certainty from me, so I learned to hide my questions. Until the day my body began to fail. It started with weakness. Nothing dramatic at first. I remember standing before a group of people and suddenly feeling as though the room had moved. I grabbed the edge of a table. One of the men noticed. "Imam, are you all right?" I smiled. "Yes." "You look pale." "I haven't eaten enough." He laughed. I laughed too. But deep inside, I knew something was wrong. That night, I told Amina that my legs felt strange. She looked at me. "What do you mean?" "They feel heavy." She frowned. "Have you been sleeping?" "Yes." "Eating?" "Yes." "Then maybe you need rest." I nodded, but I wasn't convinced. Over the next few weeks, the weakness became worse. I began stumbling. I couldn't walk as far as I used to. Sometimes I would stand up and feel as though the ground had disappeared beneath me. My brother Yusuf insisted that I see a doctor. I resisted. "It's nothing." "You've said that 3 times. "Because it's true." He stared at me. "No, brother. You don't believe that." Eventually, I agreed. The examinations began. Then more examinations. Then more. Every time I thought we were finished, another test was ordered. My family became nervous. I could see it in their faces. Amina stopped sleeping properly. My daughter began watching me whenever I walked across the room. One evening, Mariam asked me a question that broke my heart. "Daddy." "Yes." "Are you going to die?" I stared at her. "Why would you ask that?" She looked down. "Because mommy cries when she thinks we aren't looking." I didn't know what to say. I sat beside her and took her hands. "Mariam, listen to me. Your father is not going anywhere." She nodded. But I knew I had made a promise no human being can guarantee. The day I lost the ability to walk properly is something I will never forget. It was early morning. The whole house was quiet. A faint light was coming through the curtains, and I could hear birds outside. I opened my eyes and thought about the day ahead. There were people waiting for me. There were prayers to lead, families to visit, and responsibilities that belonged to me. I had no idea that within a few seconds, my understanding of my own strength would completely change. I pushed the blanket away and sat on the edge of the bed. I placed both feet on the floor. The tiles were cold beneath my feet. I put my hands on the mattress and slowly pushed myself upward. I stood. Or at least, I thought I did. Because the moment I placed my full weight on my legs, something happened. My knees suddenly buckled. There was no warning. 1 second I was standing. The next, I was falling. I reached for the bed, but I couldn't hold myself up. I hit the floor. Amina woke up. "Kareem." I couldn't answer. She rushed toward me. "Are you hurt?" I stared at my legs. I could see them. They were right there. My feet were touching the floor. Everything looked normal. But something was terribly wrong. I tried to move. Nothing. I tried again. Still nothing. My heart began racing. "Amina." "Yes." "My legs. What about them?" "I can't." I swallowed. "I can't move them properly." She knelt beside me. "Try again." I tried. Nothing. "Try to stand." "I can't." She grabbed my arm. "Come on." She pulled while I tried to push myself upward. My upper body responded. My arms responded. But my legs seemed to have forgotten what they were supposed to do. I collapsed back onto the floor. Amina screamed for Yusuf. Within minutes, my brother came rushing into the room. He knelt beside me. "Brother, look at me." I looked at him. "Can you feel your legs?" "Yes." "Can you move your feet?" I tried. My toes moved slightly. Barely. His face became serious. For the first time, I saw fear in my brother's eyes. That frightened me more than anything. I was taken for medical care. Tests were performed. Questions were asked. Doctors examined me. But despite everything they did, I still couldn't walk normally. Days passed. Then weeks. The wheelchair became part of my life. I hated it. I hated the sound of its wheels. I hated hearing someone say, "Let me push you." I hated having to ask for help. But most of all, I hated what the wheelchair represented. Dependence. Weakness. Uncertainty. I had always been the person people came to for strength. Now I needed strength from other people. Sometimes I would sit alone and stare at my legs. Move. Nothing. Come on. Nothing. I would grip the sides of the wheelchair and try to stand. My arms would strain. My shoulders would shake. But my legs would collapse beneath me, and I would sit back down. Angry. Confused. Afraid. One afternoon, Amina entered my room and found me staring at the floor. "What are you thinking about?" I didn't answer. "Kareem." Finally, I said, "I hate this." She knew what I meant. "I know. I hate being pushed around. I know. I hate needing help. I know." I looked at her. What kind of man can't even walk to the bathroom without someone helping him? She immediately responded, "Don't say that. It's true." "No. You are still my husband," she said. "You are still the father of our children. You are still Kareem." I swallowed. "But I'm not the same." She took my hand. "Maybe not. But being weak doesn't make you worthless." I wanted to believe her. I just didn't know how. The hardest part wasn't even being sick. It was answering people. People who had once watched me walk confidently into a room now watched me being pushed in a wheelchair. They would approach me carefully. "Imam, how are you?" And I always gave the same answer. "I'm fine." Even when I wasn't. Even when I had cried that morning. Even when I couldn't sleep. Even when fear kept me awake until dawn. "I'm fine." I became very good at saying those words. But inside, I was screaming. One night, I lay awake thinking about everything I had taught people. I had told people to trust God. I had told people not to be afraid. I had told people that suffering did not mean God had abandoned them. I had prayed for sick people. I had encouraged families when doctors gave them little hope. But now the question was no longer theoretical. Now it was my body, my life, my family. My future. I turned toward Amina. "Are you awake?" "Yes." "I have a question." "What?" "Do you think I'll walk again?" She was silent for a moment. Then she answered honestly, "I don't know." That answer hurt. But it was honest. After a while, she said, "But I believe God is with you." I closed my eyes. "I'm afraid." "I know." Somehow, those two words made me feel less alone. A few days later, Yusuf came to see me. He closed the door and sat down. "Brother, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Do you believe God can heal you?" I looked at him. "Of course." He nodded. "Then why are you afraid?" I didn't answer. He leaned forward. "You tell everyone else to trust God. You tell people that God is powerful. You tell people not to be afraid." I became quiet. "But you're afraid." I finally snapped. "Of course I'm afraid." My voice echoed through the room. "Look at me. I can't walk. I don't know what's happening to my body. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. I don't know if I'll ever walk again." My voice cracked. "I'm scared, Yusuf." He nodded slowly. "I know." "Then why did you ask?" "Because I wanted you to say it." "Why?" "Because you're trying to carry fear alone. You don't have to." He stood and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned around. "Don't be afraid to admit that you're scared. And don't think admitting you're afraid means you don't have faith." The door closed. I sat there alone. Then I cried. Not quietly. Not the kind of crying where a man wipes his eyes and pretends nothing happened. I cried deeply. I cried for my children. I cried for Amina. I cried for the life I had before. I cried because I was afraid. And for the first time, I stopped pretending that I was in control. I whispered, God, I don't understand. God, I'm afraid. God, I need help. I looked toward the window. God, I don't know what is happening to me. But you do. So please, don't leave me alone in this. It wasn't an eloquent prayer. It was simply the prayer of a frightened man. And I didn't know it yet, but that prayer would become the beginning of the greatest transformation of my life. Several days later, a Christian woman named Grace came to visit our family. She looked at me. Imam Karim, I heard you're sick. I am. I've been praying for you. Thank you. Then she said something that immediately caught my attention. I believe Jesus can heal you. I didn't respond. She continued. I don't mean to offend you. You're not offending me. Good. I looked toward the window. Why are you praying for me? Because you're sick. There are many sick people. I know. Why me? She smiled softly. Because someone told me your story. Before leaving, she placed a small Bible on the table. I looked at it. What's that? The New Testament. I don't need it. You don't have to read it. Then why leave it? She smiled. Because someday you might want to know what Christians actually believe about Jesus. I didn't touch the Bible that day. But I didn't throw it away either. A few nights later, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet. Everyone else was asleep. I was sitting beside the window in my wheelchair. The Bible Grace had left was on the table. I stared at it. I don't know why I reached for it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe anger. Maybe fear. I opened it. I began reading. I read slowly. I stopped often. I thought about the words. I had heard Christians speak about Jesus before, but I had never seriously examined what they believed. That night, a question entered my mind. If Jesus was truly who Christians said he was, what did that mean for me? I closed the Bible. Enough. But after a few moments, I opened it again. I continued reading. Hours passed. Then I came across the words of Jesus about being the way, the truth, and the life. I leaned back. Who are you? The room was silent. But something inside me had changed. The next morning, Amina found me with the Bible. She stopped at the doorway. What are you reading? Nothing. Karim. I closed the Bible. I was curious. She sat down. You know how people will talk. I know. You're the Imam. I know. What if someone sees this? I looked at her. What if someone sees a sick man looking for answers? She became quiet. Then she asked, Are you losing faith? No. Then what are you looking for? I looked at the Bible. I don't know. She reached for my hand. Then find the truth. Those words surprised me. My children also noticed the change. One day, my son Samir asked me, Dad, are you becoming Christian? The room became silent. I looked at him. Why would you ask that? Because you've been reading that book. I sighed. I am looking for answers. He nodded. Are you afraid? Yes. Of what? Of disappointing everyone. He sat beside me. You've spent your whole life telling people to seek God. Then why would seeking truth disappoint God? I had no answer. That night, something broke inside me. Not my faith. My pride. I had always believed I needed to have every answer. But I didn't. And admitting that was painful. Then came the worst night. It was close to midnight when I woke suddenly. My chest felt tight, and I struggled to breathe. Amina woke up. Karim. The house erupted into panic. My children were frightened. Someone called for help. My family gathered around me. I remember thinking, this is it. I thought about my life. My family. my teachings, my accomplishments. And one question became louder than everything else. Am I ready to meet God? I didn't feel ready. I began crying. Then I remembered the Bible. I whispered, "Bring me the book." Amina stared at me. The Bible. She brought it. I opened it with trembling hands. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. I only knew I needed something. I read about faith. I read about salvation. I read about Jesus calling the weary to come to him. And then I began praying. Jesus, if you are truly who this book says you are. I stopped. Tears covered my face. Have mercy on me. It was the first time I had prayed that way. Not as an imam. Not as a religious teacher. Simply as a broken man who knew he needed mercy. The next morning, Yusuf came to see me. You prayed last night. Yes. What happened? I don't know. Do you believe Jesus heard you? I swallowed. I hope so. He nodded. Grace asked me to invite you somewhere. Where? He hesitated. To church. I laughed bitterly. You're serious? Yes. No. Why? Because I'm an imam. You are also a human being. I stared at him. He continued. You've spent your life worrying about what people think. What if this is the moment you stop? I became silent. Finally, I asked. When? This Sunday. I laughed. You really think I'm going? Yusuf smiled. I think you already know. Sunday morning came. I didn't want to go. I told Amina, I'm staying home. She looked at me. Okay. I expected an argument. Instead, she simply said, then stay home. I looked at her. You're not going to convince me. No. Why? Because if you go, it has to be because you chose to. Her words stayed with me. An hour later, I was dressed. Yusuf pushed the wheelchair toward the car. When we arrived at the church, I saw the doors. I nearly told him to turn around. Take me home. He stopped. Are you sure? I stared at the church. Then I remembered my prayer. Have mercy on me. Go inside. The doors opened. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me. Some people looked confused. Others looked surprised. I heard someone whisper, "Is that the Imam?" Another person answered, "Yes." Then the pastor walked toward me. "Brother Kareem." I nodded. "Why am I here?" He smiled. "Because God loves you." I looked at him. "That's all. For today." He reached for the handles of my wheelchair. "May I?" I nodded. He pushed me forward. We entered the church. The pastor walked to the front and looked at the congregation. Today, we are not here to celebrate someone's religion. We are here because every human being needs God's mercy. I looked down. He continued. And today, a man who has spent years teaching others is willing to admit that he also needs help. My eyes filled with tears. Then he turned toward me. "Brother Kareem, would you like prayer?" I nodded. Yes. The congregation began praying. I closed my eyes. I heard voices around me. Jesus. Lord, have mercy. Father, heal him. The pastor placed his hand on my shoulder. Lord Jesus, if this man has come here seeking truth, reveal yourself to him. I felt a strange warmth. I opened my eyes. Nothing looked different. I was still in the wheelchair. Then the pastor stopped. He looked at me. "Brother Kareem." "Yes." "Can you feel your feet?" I froze. I looked down. I didn't want to answer. Then I moved my toes. My eyes widened. I moved them again. I could feel something. A sensation. Small, but unmistakable. I can feel them. The pastor's expression changed. "Try moving your foot." I did. Nothing happened. Then I tried again. My foot moved. Just slightly. Someone screamed. Another person covered her mouth. The pastor said, "Don't rush." I tried again. My foot moved. Then my other foot. I felt something running through my legs. I grabbed the sides of the wheelchair. "What are you doing?" Yusuf shouted. I pushed myself upward. The pastor reached toward me. "Careful." I stood. For the first time in months. I stood. The entire church gasped. Then someone screamed, "Jesus!" The room erupted. People were crying. People were praying. Some were kneeling. Others were raising their hands. I stood there staring at my own legs. I couldn't understand it. I took one step. Then another. My knees trembled, but they held me. I took another. And another. The church erupted again. But I wasn't celebrating yet. Because something much more powerful had happened to me than the ability to walk. I looked at the pastor. "Why?" He came toward me. "What do you mean? Why did this happen?" He smiled. "Because Jesus loves you." I shook my head. "No. I mean, why me?" He answered. "I don't know why God chooses one moment to reveal His mercy in a particular way. But I know this, you came here looking for truth." I looked down. Tears were falling. I was angry. I know. I was afraid. I know. I didn't understand. "You don't have to understand everything today." I whispered. But I felt something. "What did you feel?" I looked around the church. Then I said, "Peace." The pastor nodded. And then I finally understood why I had been brought there. It wasn't simply about my legs. It was about my heart. Yusuf called my family. "Come to the church." Amina answered. "What happened?" "Just come." "Is Kareem all right?" "He's standing." Silence. "What?" "He's standing." Within minutes, Amina and the children arrived. The church doors opened. Amina walked inside. She saw me. Standing. She stopped. Her hand went to her mouth. "Kareem." I looked at her. "Amina." She began crying. My daughter ran toward me. "Daddy." I bent down and hugged her. She cried against my chest. "You're standing." I laughed through my tears. "Yes." My son Samir came closer and hugged me. Then Yusuf walked toward me. I looked at him. "You brought me here." He nodded. "Yes." "Why?" He wiped his face. "Because I knew you needed to meet Jesus." I looked at him. Then I looked at my family. The pastor asked me if I wanted to say something. I stepped toward the microphone. My hands were trembling. I looked at the congregation. I came here because I was desperate. The room became silent. I was afraid. I had spent years telling people to trust God, but when my own life fell apart, I discovered how much fear was inside my heart. I looked toward my family. My wife saw me crying. My children saw me afraid. And I began asking questions I was too proud to ask before. I looked at the Bible. I began reading about Jesus. Then I said, "I did not come here today because someone forced me. I came because I wanted to know the truth." The room became very still. Then I said, "I believe Jesus Christ has shown me mercy." The church erupted again. But this time, I understood the tears. They weren't celebrating a religious argument. They were celebrating what they believed God had done in the life of a broken man. That evening, I went home. I couldn't sleep. I sat beside my bed with my Bible open. I stared at the pages. Then I prayed. Jesus. I had said that name many times before. But that night, it sounded different. I don't understand everything. I still have questions. But I know what happened to me. I looked at my legs. I know I came into that church in a wheelchair. I whispered. And I know I walked out. But then I said, more importantly. I placed my hand over my chest. I know something changed here. My heart, my pride, my fear, everything. I finally understood that faith isn't pretending you have no questions. Faith is being willing to seek truth even when the answer challenges you. Not everyone accepted what happened. Some said it was impossible. Some said I had exaggerated. Others said I had been manipulated. One man confronted me. You were an imam. Yes. And now you say Jesus healed you. Yes. How can we believe you? I looked at him. You don't have to believe me. He seemed surprised. I cannot force you. If you want answers, seek them. He asked. And if I don't? That's your choice. I walked away. For the first time in my life, I realized I didn't need to win every argument. I simply needed to tell the truth about what I had experienced. I also wanted answers from medicine. I didn't want to pretend that faith meant ignoring doctors. I returned for evaluation. The doctors examined me. They asked questions. They watched me walk. One doctor looked puzzled. How are you walking? I smiled. I don't know. He examined me again. I didn't claim to understand every medical question. I didn't claim that every problem in my life had disappeared. But I knew one thing. I had been unable to walk. Now I could. And I couldn't deny what I had personally experienced. But there was another miracle. One that nobody saw. It happened inside my heart. Before that day, I thought strength meant never admitting weakness. I thought leadership meant always having answers. I thought faith meant never questioning. But now I understood something different. Sometimes the most courageous thing a person can do is admit, I don't know. Sometimes the strongest prayer is, God, help me. And sometimes the greatest transformation isn't what happens to the body. It's what happens to the heart. My legs had changed. But so had I. Several weeks later, I returned to the church. This time, I walked through the doors. No wheelchair. No one pushing me. I walked. Step by step. The same people who had watched me arrive helplessly were now watching me walk toward them. The elderly woman who had cried when I first entered came toward me. She took my hands. I knew you would come back. I smiled. Why? Because we prayed. I looked at her. Thank you. She shook her head. Don't thank me. She pointed upward. Thank him. I looked toward the cross, and tears came to my eyes. If I could sit with the man I was before everything happened, I would tell him, Kareem, slow down. Listen. You don't have to pretend you're stronger than you are. You don't have to be afraid of honest questions. You don't have to protect your reputation more than you seek truth. I would tell him that suffering can expose things success hides. I would tell him that pride can make a person blind. And I would tell him that sometimes a person must reach the end of himself before he realizes how much he needs God. One passage became especially meaningful to me. Jesus said, Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11 verse 28. When I first read those words, I thought about my body. I was tired. I was sick. I was afraid. But later, I realized they spoke to something deeper. My heart was tired. My mind was tired. My soul was tired. I had been carrying the weight of expectations, reputation, fear, and the need to appear certain. Then, in the middle of my brokenness, I found an invitation. Come. Not pretend. Not perform. Not prove yourself. Simply come. One evening, my daughter Mariam sat beside me. Daddy. Yes. Are you still the same person? I smiled. Why do you ask? Because everything changed. I thought for a moment. Yes. She looked confused. No. I laughed. I'm still your father. She smiled. But I hope I'm a better man. She leaned against me. What changed? I looked at her. I learned that being strong doesn't mean never being broken. She didn't fully understand. So I explained. Sometimes God allows us to reach the end of ourselves so we can finally realize that we need Him. Eventually, someone asked me to share my testimony. I stood before a room full of people. Some knew me. Some didn't. Some were Christians. Some were not. I looked at them and said, I am not standing here because I have all the answers. I am standing here because I know what happened to me. I told them about the wheelchair, the weakness, the fear, my family, the Bible, the church, the prayer, the moment I stood, and the transformation that followed. Then I said, do not turn my testimony into hatred against another religion. The room became very still. People are not enemies because they are different. Every human being is someone God sees. My story is not about mocking Muslims. It is not about humiliating anyone. It is about what happened when a broken man began seeking God with an open heart. Then I told them, seek God. Pray. Read the scriptures. Ask sincere questions. And don't allow pride to stop you from searching for truth. People often ask me, what happened when you stood? I tell them, I don't know exactly how to explain it. Then they ask, was it the screaming? No. Was it the people crying? No. Was it the pastor? No. Then what was it? I tell them, the greatest moment wasn't when my legs moved. They look confused. The greatest moment was when my heart surrendered. Because a man can walk and still be lost. A man can have strong legs and a broken soul. A man can have money and no peace. A man can have a title and still be searching. I had been an imam. People respected me. People listened to me. But I still had questions. And I believe God used my weakness to bring those questions into the light. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had refused. What if I had told Yusuf to take me home? What if I had allowed pride to win? What if I had been more concerned about what people would say than about what was happening inside my heart? I don't know. But I went. I entered that church. And that decision changed the direction of my life. Not because a building has magical power. Not because Christians are better people than everyone else. But because I believe God met me in my desperation. And I will never forget it. One evening, Yusuf and I were sitting outside. He looked at me. You remember when I pushed your wheelchair? I laughed. How could I forget? You were angry. Very angry. He smiled. Then he became serious. Are you grateful? I looked at him. Yes. For what? I thought about it. For bringing me there. He nodded. Then I said, but you know something. What? You didn't heal me. I know. You only pushed the wheelchair. He smiled. And who pushed the wheelchair? I laughed. Exactly. He leaned back. Then I said, sometimes God uses people to carry us when we don't have the strength to move ourselves. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then he said, I think that was the first time I saw you truly surrender. He was right. If you're watching this right now and you're facing something you cannot explain, I want you to listen carefully. Maybe you're sick. Maybe you're afraid. Maybe your family is falling apart. Maybe you're carrying a secret nobody knows. Maybe you've prayed for months and nothing seems to be changing. Maybe you have questions about God. Maybe you're angry with God. Maybe you're ashamed because you don't have the faith you think you're supposed to have. I understand. I was there. I sat in a wheelchair. I cried when nobody was watching. I was afraid of tomorrow. I didn't have all the answers. But I learned something. Don't let your unanswered questions stop you from seeking God. Keep searching. Keep praying. Keep reading. Keep asking. And don't allow pride to make your decisions for you. The Bible says in Jeremiah 29 verse 13, and ye shall seek me, and find me, when ye shall search for me with all your heart. That verse became personal to me. I had spent years teaching others about faith, but it took suffering for me to realize that knowing about God and sincerely seeking Him are not always the same thing. There is one image I will never forget. The image of the wheelchair sitting near the front of the church. Empty. Nobody was sitting in it. I was standing. My family was crying. The congregation was praying. And that empty wheelchair seemed to say everything I couldn't say. It reminded me of where I had been. Weak. Afraid. Uncertain. But I also knew something. The wheelchair wasn't the most important thing I left behind. I left behind pride. I left behind the need to appear invincible. I left behind the belief that I had to have every answer before I could seek truth. And I walked forward. Not because I suddenly understood everything, but because I had found enough reason to keep following the light I had discovered. People still ask, why did everyone scream? They screamed because they saw something they never expected. A man who had entered in a wheelchair was suddenly standing. But if you ask me what the real miracle was, I would tell you this. The greatest miracle wasn't that I stood on my feet. It was that I finally learned to bow my heart. My legs were weak, but my pride was stronger. My body was broken, but my heart was closed. And when I finally surrendered, everything changed. My name is Kareem. I was once a man who thought he had to have every answer. Then I became a man with no answers. I was once the person people came to when they were afraid. Then I became the person sitting in a wheelchair, afraid himself. I was once certain that I knew exactly where my life was going. Then my body stopped cooperating. And in that darkness, I began searching. I opened a Bible. I read about Jesus. I entered a church. I asked for prayer. And I stood. But the story didn't end when I stood. That was where another journey began. Because walking is easy compared with learning how to live differently. Learning to forgive. Learning to love people who disagree with you. Learning to admit when you're wrong. Learning to pray when you don't understand. Learning to trust God when you can't see what comes next. That is the journey I'm still on. And if you're watching this, perhaps you're on your own journey too. Maybe you're sitting in a metaphorical wheelchair right now. Maybe something in your life has stopped moving. Your marriage, your finances, your dreams, your hope, your faith, your peace. You may be asking, God, why me? I don't know the answer to every why. But I know this. Don't stop seeking. Don't stop praying. Don't let fear have the final word. And don't let pride keep you from the truth. Jesus said, if the Son therefore shall make you free, ye shall be free indeed. John 8 verse 36. I read those words differently now. Freedom isn't simply being able to walk. Freedom is being released from the chains inside your heart. Freedom is being able to say, Lord, I need you. Freedom is being able to admit, I don't have all the answers. Freedom is trusting God enough to keep seeking Him. And that is what happened to me. They brought me into that church in a wheelchair. Everyone thought the miracle would be about my legs. But when I look back now, I realize the miracle was much deeper. My body learned to walk. But my heart learned to surrender. And that changed everything. So if you are watching this with tears in your eyes, if you're facing something impossible, if you've been praying and wondering whether God still sees you, remember this. Your darkest moment does not have to be your final chapter. The place where you feel weakest may become the place where your faith becomes strongest. The question isn't whether you have every answer. The question is whether you're willing to seek. And if you are, start with a simple prayer. You don't need impressive words. You don't need to pretend. Just speak honestly. Jesus, I need you. Then keep seeking. Keep praying. Keep reading. Keep believing. And let God write the part of your story that you cannot yet see. If this testimony touched your heart, don't just watch and scroll away. Take a moment to look at your own life. Ask yourself what you've been carrying. Ask yourself what fear has been controlling you. Ask yourself whether pride has kept you from seeking God. And if you believe Jesus is worthy of your trust, write in the comments, Jesus, I believe. Not because typing those words is magic, but because sometimes a simple declaration can mark the beginning of a new chapter. Share this testimony with someone who needs hope. Someone who is sick. Someone who is afraid. Someone who feels forgotten. Someone who thinks their story is already over. Because sometimes the chapter that looks like the end is only the beginning. And I know that because I was the man in the wheelchair. But I didn't stay there.